Let everybody know we're about 2 minutes from starting here, so please be patient and we'll get going in a little bit. All right, it's 1:30. I'd like to get started now. Thank everybody for attending the event today. It's been going well. I hope lots of great content. Hope everybody's been getting a lot out of it. Uh, Thank you for attending the event, like I said, from New York City Department of Education, the Beyond Access Forum. This event is brought to you by the DOE Division of Specialized Instruction and Student Support and the Office of Digital Inclusion and the New York City School Library System. A special thank you to all our partners. Be sure to visit their booths throughout the day. Even after this, you can go and check in with them. I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone to log into the Conference Hub using the link sent in your confirmation email. Once you're logged in, you can visit a partner booth, as I mentioned, and learn about their offerings and book a meeting or live chat with them. You can network with all of today's attendees via the registrant directory and chat features. You can access all of the conference resources in the resource section, and you can enter our passport to prizes. And throughout the Conference Hub, you will find several buttons to enter yourself into our passport to prizes. Each time you find a button and fill in the form, you will earn one entry into the raffle. All entries are eligible for a series of prize drawings. Only one prize per participant. We will announce winners via email at the end of the conference. Before we begin, just a quick couple of notes here. If you have any questions for the presenter during the session, please submit it through the Zoom chat feature. You have the option to turn on closed captioning by clicking Show Subtitle within your Zoom console. Be sure to use the conference hashtag NYC Schools Inclusion in any social media posts. And at the end, I will be posting in the chat link, the chat box, the link for the CTLE credit. Okay. That all said, I'm going to hand this over to Regis, and it's all his.
Thanks, Ray. I appreciate it. I'm just going to share my screen real quick so we can get my presentation on here. And as Ray mentioned, I know there's the passport to prizes that you're doing as well. But in addition to that, we are also doing a raffle giveaway for an iPad too. So I'm going to drop the link in the chat right now. If you want to go in there and fill that raffle out, feel free. I'm also going to drop a link in the chat to our NYCDOE Sora page. So if you're unfamiliar with Sora, this is the ebook and audiobook platform that I'm going to be discussing today. I'm not really going to be doing a training on Sora itself or the interface. We have other resources for that. The site that I just dropped in there is a great one to check out yourself. But today we're going to be focusing on how digital books can help build inclusive learning communities. And we're going to look at this from a few different aspects. I want to thank you all for letting me join today. It's been a pleasure working with the DOE thus far. Just a little background on myself. My name is Regis Coustillac. I'm the DOE account manager for Overdrive Education. If you're not familiar with Overdrive Education, you may be familiar with us from the public library side of things. You may get ebooks and audiobooks from us from either NYPL or Queens Public Library, Brooklyn Public Library, whatever you may use. Background on myself before working at Overdrive. I've been at Overdrive for just over 3 years now. Before coming to Overdrive, I was a teaching artist for a nonprofit poetry center in Ohio. And I used poetry and creative writing to teach students, adults in our community here in Ohio, Northeast Ohio. We taught immigrant and refugee populations, lots of different outreach stuff. So I was not a classroom teacher, but I do have some background on that side of things. We're going to dive right in, and I want to talk today about uh, ebook and audiobook usage in the classroom and how it can be used. So we're going to start today on sort of a high level and then get down into the nitty gritty and the actual tools that you could be using with your ebooks and your audiobooks. The numbers that you see in front of you today are from the 2019 K-12 Digital Content Report, which was a collaborative effort between ASCD and Overdrive Education to get a sense of how school administrators are using ebooks and audiobooks, specifically in the classroom. So as you can see on the left-hand side there, number one, the three most popular responses as to how ebooks and audiobooks were used were number one, to support literacy. And it's obviously just that, it's a literacy tool. Number two, to support struggling readers. 55% of administrators of respondents said that they used it to support struggling readers. And we'll touch into why that would be the case and why this provides sort of a different point of access than print books would. And then the number three response was using it to support language acquisition and ESL. And we're also going to touch on that from a content perspective and then from an actual application perspective as well. But I want to point out on the right-hand side some of those benefits of using digital content. Some of you may be very familiar with using digital content. For some of you, this may be one of the more early conversations about ebooks and audiobooks, and that's okay. But I want to sort of get you thinking about how it differentiates itself from using just a print book. So the number one thing that we're looking at here is individualized instruction. Ebooks and audiobooks give you a very flexible way to deliver content to students. And we'll touch on different editions, delivering an audiobook where other students may be reading the text, delivering an audiobook in addition to the text, or supplementing with a graphic novelization of a book. But it provides you that individualized instruction where you can get students the exact copy of a book that they need, as well as customizing their settings to a format that fits them or suits them a little bit better. The number two benefit or response in terms of benefits from these respondents on our survey was that it allows students to practice independently. We know how important those independent reading sessions are to develop literacy, student literacy. And then I want to focus on the next three all sort of together. 54% said that digital content captures greater student attention and engagement, right? And you can pair that with the one below where we're focusing on the delivery method of instruction. When working with schools to implement ebooks and audiobooks, one of the big concerns, I guess you could say, from teachers and administrators is, what if our students prefer a print book? Of course, we don't want to interfere with that. If that's how students learn best, if that's the model that students engage with best, that's fantastic. But as your students continue to progress into this digital age, they really are digital natives and they're used to interacting with devices. They're used to reading things on screens. They're used to being read to with headphones. This is how they engage, not just with schoolwork, but with content in general. So those two, I believe, are sort of paired together. That delivery method really does help drive student attention and engagement because they're going to already be engaging with their devices. I like to think about it as, when I was growing up, my mother sent me to the library because it was a safe place in our neighborhood. We could go to that library. She knew where we were. I consider your digital library that same safe place on the internet. Students are familiar with the device itself, but we want to make sure they're using it for something that's going to benefit them. And then the last thing here is that it empowers students to take charge of their own learning. By delivering these differentiated models of instruction, whether it's different editions or whatever it may be, you're really putting the learning into the students' hands. You don't need them to feel as if they are singled out or different, that they're just learning on their own terms. So we really want to make sure you're all thinking about how ebooks and audiobooks can make a difference for your student populations. Just a few more statistics here. There are 7 million disabled students in the US. It's 14% total of public school enrollment nationally. 34% of these students, of this 14%, have a specific learning disability, whether it's dyslexia, a brain injury, or a chronic or acute illness that may be affecting them and causing a learning disability. And you may be familiar with this number already, but in the state of New York, that number is 19.2% of public enrollment. It's not 14. So you're well above average and actually the largest population of disabled students in the US. So because of this, we really want to focus on how can we reach these students? How can we grasp them? How can we make a difference in their learning experience? And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about here. So 4 things to focus on as we move through this presentation, and how ebooks and audiobooks are supporting inclusive instruction. Number 1, it's available 24/7. Whether you forget your school supplies at school, you can access these books anywhere on any device. As you see in that second bubble, it's device agnostic. So even if you have a parent's cell phone, if you have any sort of device in the home, you've never really forgotten your work. You've never forgotten your book in your locker. We know that this is doubly important too when we're talking about remote learning and being away from the actual classroom. And especially when students may have internet connectivity issues. Everything I'm going to discuss today, as I said, I'm not going to go into a deep dive in the Sora platform itself, but you should know all of our books, all of our resources are able to be downloaded on a device for use later. So that should not be a concern. But again, it's device agnostic. They can access in a browser, on an Android or Apple device, whatever it may be. The personalization features that we're going to be talking about specifically, whether it's changing the fonts, changing the languages, changing the backlighting, making sure that students are reading in the most comfortable way possible, which obviously is not an option when you're dealing with a print book that's static, that's not going to change. And then multiple access options. So when we're talking about content, providing different options, different additions when necessary. Now, as I've sort of alluded to in the past few slides, ebook and audiobook adoption is really the first step to reaching more readers. It's going to take you there, but content selection is just as important, right? Just as important as the platform itself, the tools and features that you'll see on the website or that you'll see within the books, is making sure that you're selecting the correct books. So we're going to take some time now to talk about what that is, what that looks like. So number 1, inclusivity, right? We want to make sure that students feel represented when they're reading the books at school. So this goes to content selection, not just for the classroom, but for free read or choice read novels that you're making available, or books that are available to your students in a standing library, in addition to what's actually being assigned to them. I've often said in my experience working with students, that I've never met a student that doesn't like to read. My mother growing up was a reading teacher my entire life in a public school here in Ohio. I've never met a student in my life that doesn't like to read. I've met many students that have never found the book that they like to read. And that is a really big difference there. Making sure that we're connecting students to books where they see themselves reflected, whether it's in the characters and the authors and the perspectives and the narratives. And in that last check mark here, you'll see it really does initiate those conversations. It engages students in a way that they wouldn't feel engaged with books where they don't feel represented. So the importance of inclusivity when selecting content itself is crucial. So what makes a collection inclusive? I know many of you will probably consider this review, but for a lot of us, we need to review this because it's an important thing. Number 1, the key factors here could be race, ethnicity, and religion, right? We want to make sure we're providing a diverse range of titles, and it's not just the typical Western canon that most of us in school growing up on were exposed to. We want to make sure that we're seeing our students' experiences reflected. And, the experiences in the US are ever changing. So we want to make sure that this is ever changing as well. Same thing when it comes to sexuality and gender. This is an important topic right now as students are discovering themselves in school. Um, so we want to make sure that they feel supported in that way. And then same thing with ability and body diversity. We want to make sure that that's supported. And to me, that last point is so important, making sure that this is intersectional, that these aren't just one-off things, or we're checking them off on a list and saying, yep, we're racially diverse with this book, or we've included LGBTQ narrative in this book. We want to make sure that all of this is blended together, and more than anything, incorporates a gripping narrative, something that students can connect with. I went to a speech with Jason Reynolds here at a local school, a local high school, and most of Jason Reynolds is. You can see a couple of his books on the list here: Ghost, the Stamped remix with Ibram X. Kendi, Long Way Down, which is great, fantastic book. And he said something really interesting. He made the point that a lot of his books are being taught in school lately, but he doesn't want his books to be taught in 50 years. He doesn't want to remain on that list 50 years from now. He wants that list to develop as experiences do, as our society does, as our culture does. So I thought that was just a great viewpoint to be considering. If we're teaching the same books that we taught 50 years ago, are we really doing our students a service? I don't necessarily believe that. Other factors to consider when we're talking about this: economic disparity, location, maturity. Obviously these are things that we all want to include, these inclusive topics here, but we still want to make sure that the narratives themselves, the books themselves, are appropriate, that students are at the age or at the maturity level where they're able to comprehend this stuff and consume it and engage with it. And authors are doing a great job of that, of putting out content that checks all those boxes. So how does Overdrive help schools create more inclusive reading communities? We're going to dive into some specifics right now. Number one, the best catalog of ebooks and audiobooks for schools. We really believe we have the best catalog across the board. We have access to over 3 million titles. We have access to the top-notch front list titles from the best publishers, not just in the country, which is certainly true, but in the world. We'll touch on it a little bit here, but we work with many international publishers. So when we're getting into foreign language content, we really have the best content from those native publishers. And you can see whether it's instructional or independent reading, it doesn't matter. So we're going to have those books that you're reading in class. We're going to have those books that you're reading independently, that you're working on with students for choice reading. And then professional development as well. And we're not going to touch too much on this today, but I really do want to make the point right now that professional development is just important. It's just as important as any of the other instructional independent reading. We want to make sure that, especially now as we're focused on remote learning and different pedagogy methods, that your teachers are aware on the most recent research, that they're becoming the best teachers they can be in this environment. So we have a lot of professional development titles. We work with ASCD and ISTE and other professional development publishers. The other thing that we do to support inclusive collections is that we have titles across the board, across age, grade levels, abilities. If you tell us that we need high-low readers that are in 10th grade but are reading at a 3rd grade level, and we need content that's going to engage them, and they're from this type of neighborhood that has this economic background, all of that is so important. We have titles to support it, guaranteed. So we have titles that will support virtually any student that you have in the classroom. And all of this is still related to that content selection, making sure that you have the best books available, that your books really represent the experiences of your students. All of this is interconnected with that. Books in unique formats. And I do want to slow down a bit here and touch on each of these and their importance. Number one, audiobooks. Many of you may be familiar with audiobooks. Maybe you use playaways or other devices to support audio instruction, and that's fantastic. Audiobooks in Sora are much easier than any of those. you're going to be using the same app you'd use to access ebooks. It's just like listening to, if you're familiar with listening to podcasts or anything of that nature, it's so easy. It's going to stream, the book will download. But this is really great because you can do a few different things with this. Number one, you could provide just the base audio file, right? You could just provide the audiobooks for students that need that sort of differentiated instruction. Number two, you could pair the audiobook with the text or with an ebook so that students have the ability to read the text and listen at the same time, which research has shown increases comprehension, right? It increases comprehension across the board in every level of reader. But number three, you can use audiobooks in different situations where you may not be thinking about it. The example I use a lot for this is if you have students that are involved in sports, and they maybe get a concussion or something of that nature where they can't um, where they can't re-enter the classroom or re-engage with their classwork. Audiobooks are actually a way that students can engage with their text much earlier. They're not allowed to be reading or looking at screens, but audiobooks are an approved format for students with concussions. So these are just things that maybe you're not thinking about every day, but this is a really easy way to differentiate for students. The second thing I'm going to bring up here are read-alongs. Read-alongs are very similar, all the benefits that I just laid out with audiobooks, except the key difference here is that you're going to have that professionally narrated narration audio experience paired with the text itself. So read-alongs are produced by publishers as technically ebooks, but they are professionally narrated. And as that narration is being read aloud to the student, the words in the text are going to be highlighted along. And it's going to be just like if you consider some of those holiday specials you watched or musicals, whether it's, Charlie Brown or whatever it may be, where sort of the ball is jumping along the words. It's the same idea, and it's very effective for developing phonetic skills, for developing readers, for struggling readers, um, high-low. Most of the read-alongs you'll see are produced sort of at the developing reader phase. So you're going to have a lot of picture books, that sort of thing. But we do have high-low read-alongs for junior high, middle school, even high school students to give them that extra added level of support. One of the things that I really like to key in on here with audiobooks and read-alongs, and I really want to hammer home to you, is the professional narration. I can't focus enough on how important that is for students who are engaging with a story, to hear someone who's really bringing that story to life. I'm sure we've all had that experience where we heard a teacher or a parent for the first time read a book with voices, where they really brought it to life. The same is true with audiobooks and with read-alongs. It's not that robotic sort of text-to-speech voice that we hear so often, which is great, but it's not the same. The other thing that comes with these is contextual sounds. So if you're reading a book that takes place in the jungle, you'll hear jungle sounds or jungle noises. The same thing with city streets. You'll hear those things that contextualize the story and root the listener to that narrative. This is so important when we talk about, say, Shakespeare, something that can become very stale very quickly, but listening to an audiobook version, again, brings it to life. Shakespeare is supposed to be performed as a play, so hearing it can really make a big difference for the comprehension level of your students. And then the last format that we want to talk about today, graphic novels and comics. For a long time, we know that comic books and graphic novels have been stigmatized. But it's really important to bring this back into the classroom. You'll see some fantastic graphic novels, comic books right there. But we also want to point out the fact that so many required reads or standard classroom reads are being turned into graphic novels, whether it's, The Handmaid's Tale, whether it is To Kill a Mockingbird, The Giver, Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, I just mentioned a few minutes ago, was just turned into a graphic novel. So this is a great way for students who may be struggling with their reading level, maybe struggling readers, to engage with the same book that their classmates may be. And it's just a little bit of a differentiated model for them. So again, they're going to get some of the really great quotes. They're going to get the great textual engagement that you'd have with the actual book itself, with that picture quality, that illustration, we can say the visual supplementation for graphic novels and comics. So I'm someone that I read all the time and I love graphic novels. It's just a great joy to me. It's one of the ways that I got into books originally. It was my dad showing me his comic book collection. So a fantastic option here. I'm going to pause for a second. I do see that we have some chat coming in and some folks are helping each other. That's great. I am going to address the chat at the end. We'll have time for questions. I'll go through that. But if you have any other questions, you can always reach out outside of this session. So I just wanted to say that. The other thing here too, LOTE titles, right? Languages other than English. We want to focus on supporting ESL students or students that are working on language skills for other languages, right? If you have a foreign language class and you really want to get them practice with those other languages. As I mentioned earlier, we work with native publishers. We work with international publishers. So when we're looking at some front list new release titles, we want to get students the book they want to read in the language that they're comfortable with or in the language that they're working on. So as you can see, we have many different languages, whether it's Chinese, Spanish, Italian, German, Arabic, French, so many more than that. If there are any other languages that you're really interested in, we can help you find that. I guarantee we work with those publishers. And this is a really big benefit here too. Our dedicated team of content experts, our content specialists, these are our on-staff librarians that are constantly going through creating lists, finding these best resources, going through the awards, SLGA reviews, all sorts of things. So in our resource center, this is a screenshot of our resource center, you'll see these different lists that our librarians are constantly putting together. So you'll see whether it's just popular reading, you want to get some titles for independent reading, that's great. If you're specifically focused on languages and learning or diverse titles, we've already put together those resource lists for you that are going to be the newest, most engaging titles for students. So this is a really great, I can't stress this enough, how fantastic our librarians are at putting these pieces together. And at the same time, if you don't see what you're looking for there, but you have a specific request, they'll put those bundles together for you. They'll help, go through and find that content that you're looking for. And then finally here, just another thing that we do or we're doing all the time and has only been ramped up since the pandemic began in our response to COVID-19 is no cost collections, no cost book collections for current partners. Right now we're featuring our own voices and diversity titles for students, 50 plus titles that are all simultaneous use, meaning there's no limit to the number of students that could access those books at once. And we just went live with our Spanish titles for young readers. So again, really high interest front list titles in Spanish that are going to be fantastic, whether you have ESL students or students that are practicing the Spanish language. So we're always working with publishers to get more resources available for schools at no cost to the schools themselves. Publishers are learning a lot about the digital space and how important ebooks and audiobooks are for their schools and for school partners. So we're going to constantly be that advocate for you when it's concerning the publishers. And now we're going to talk about some of the inclusive benefits of digital reading apps like Sora. As I mentioned, Sora is our school reading app that you have access to right now through the DOE. So you can go to the link that I dropped in chat earlier at the beginning of this session. I'll drop it again at the end of the session so that you have it, and you'll have all this stuff as follow-up as well. But some of the benefits of apps like Sora. Number one, you can access the school's collection. So you're able to browse and borrow from the school's digital collection that they've already been building out. You can also, in addition to the district-wide DOE collection, you could build out your individual school collection. So if you want to have a more robust audiobook or graphic novel collection, or you're focusing on specific languages that are a pressing need in your school environment, you can build that out. I will also add too that you can add your public library, and you can borrow books directly from, whether it's New York Public Library, Brooklyn, Queens, you can borrow books directly from there. The added benefit being if they go through Sora, which is the school app, as opposed to Libby, which is the public library app, then you will be able to use sort of maturity filters for your students. Your students when they log in, will automatically know what grade they're in. So they won't be seeing any sort of 50 Shades of Grey or any romance novels from the public library, which we know is there. And so when we're directing students to those resources, we want to make sure that it's safe for them, a safe space for them. Again, I want to thank everyone in the chat that's helping each other. We'll get to that chat in just a moment. Sora is easy to find and use via apps for students and schools that you're already using. I know a lot of you will already have it in your portal, so you should already be able to access it. Again, I'll drop the link in here again that will show you how to get to Sora for your school. Another tool that schools can use is the dyslexic font here. And so whether they're reading the book or whether they're interacting with the website itself, students can use this dyslexic font. Now, this dyslexic font is just another tool. You know, we had a conversation today in our chat during this in my, I forget what it's called, but the Explore Hub or whatever it was, with someone who was correctly pointing out that, you know, there's a lot of myths that go around about dyslexia, and the science is sort of out on fonts and alternative fonts, but we see this as a really positive option for students to have. We have lots of marketing materials that just say, hey, students, if this font is easier for you to read, then you might want to try out the ebook collection that we have. So students can adjust that font. You'll see on the right side here whenever they're in a book, and they can also adjust the website interface itself so that the website itself has this alternative font. High contrast modes is the same thing, whether they're in the book or you're just using the site itself. They can turn on that high contrast mode, which I don't know about you guys, but since I've been working remotely, which has been since March now, changing this on a lot of my devices has made all the difference. You know, it's allowed me to read more. I read a lot of books in an ebook format from my public library, and I turn that high contrast mode on. So this is just another really good tool to make sure that students feel supported, that they have these options to change that are more comfortable for them. This is all about comfort of reading for the students, whatever's going to make the most difference for them. And then adjustable fonts, text sizes, and lighting. This is really important. I'm going to touch on the text size here for just a moment, especially. I know so many people know the importance of large text or large print books. It makes a big difference for students when they don't have to struggle through all of those words on the page. They can become overwhelmed. With ebooks, this is a standard setting. This is something that they can change at any time. They can increase the size of the text to whatever is comfortable for them. And you'll see this option here on the right-hand side to include accessibility sizes as well that will let them get even larger. So whether they're accessing this on a laptop, a Chromebook, an iPad, a tablet, whatever it may be, they can set this to whatever is the most comfortable for them. Apart from the Open Dyslexic font, we also have other fonts that they're able to select from. So again, whatever their comfort level is. They can also, you'll see, change sort of the justification, the line spacing, all sorts of different things here. And then a multilingual interface. So the website itself, Sora, when they're interacting with the website, they will be able to change. We have 10 languages available now, and we're constantly iterating that to add more. So right now it's Chinese, both simplified and traditional, English, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Russian, Spanish, and Swedish. As I said, we are constantly iterating this, so we're hoping to have even more finished by the end of the year, and by the end of the school year, even more than that. So again, we just want to support those students. Now, this is for the website itself. If we will not be able to natively translate entire books. So that is where we'd have to have, if you wanted to have, say, like the Spanish version of New Kid, you'd have to have the English version and the Spanish version. It's two different things. And then exportable notes and highlights. So this is great because I don't know about you guys, I consider myself a rule follower in most aspects, but I have been known to ruin a few library books. I like to write in my books. If I own the book, that's fantastic, but I have a problem when I'm reading library books. I'll be the first person to put my hand up. I've had to pay for those books sometimes and buy a new copy for the library because I just have an impulse to write in the book and scribble. That's how I learn. That's how I comprehend as I'm reading. The same is true for students. So if you're reading an ebook that you're checking out from your school library, or if you're using a school copy of an ebook or even a public library copy, you can interact directly with that text. You can take notes and highlights in the book itself. And when the next student gets that copy of the book, it'll be a clean copy for them, but you still have those notes and highlights. Anytime you check that book out, it will still have all of that, the highlighted material. And then you can export those. So it's not just in Sora, but you could export it right to Google Drive. You could access this in Google later. You could export it as a PDF, whatever you may need. So that way you can interact with the text, and then you can begin to interact with your peers or with your teachers. You can build those reading groups around these notes and highlights so that the students can share notes with each other, share thoughts with one another. So this is a really great way to keep students engaged with the text and make sure that they have all of the tools that they need. And then an in-app access to definitions in Google Translate. One more anecdote about when I was learning to read. Again, as I said, my mother was a reading teacher, so I had access to lots of books, which was fantastic for me as a young child. But I had access to books that had content I didn't quite understand. So I remember one year for my birthday, I got a big dictionary, a thick dictionary about this big that I still have. And I would sit there on my bed reading a book, and I would have the dictionary next to me because I would have to look up each word that I'd never seen before. And I did that. It was painstaking, but it made me a better reader. We've made it much easier. So anytime you're in an ebook, you can simply click on a word and define it right there in the text without opening any other tabs or anything else that might lead students to be distracted. You can do the same thing with Google Translate. You can use that Google Translate plugin to get quick definitions for any foreign language words, or if it's an ESL student, any words that they're unfamiliar with in English. So great tools here that students can access at any time in ebooks. And then achievements and avatars to reward student engagement. I mean, another thing, we want to drive student engagement. We want to make reading fun. And so these are just a few examples of some of the badges that students can earn, but they do earn badges as they progress on sort of their reading adventure in Sora. So badges for different things, for reading certain types of books, for accomplishing certain positive reading behaviors, we would say, reading certain amounts of time or that sort of thing. And then for learning how to do certain tools, whether it's defining a word or taking their first note or highlight. We've seen this as a great way to drive user engagement, student engagement, and to keep them going back in those books and reading more and more. These are a few sort of quotes from partners that have used Overdrive, that have used Sora, that have used ebooks and audiobooks. I'm not going to dig too deeply into these, but you will receive these slides as follow-up. So I want to make sure you all have that as a resource. But these are real people that have used ebooks and audiobooks in the classroom, and hopefully it will spark sort of your imagination as to how you can use ebooks and audiobooks in the classroom. Some of the things that I will touch on just for a moment here is paired audiobooks or paired graphic novels with text, that foreign language content that we talked about. So hopefully this will get you thinking a little bit. And then on the next slide, we have what students are saying about Sora. So this is really important too, because as much as we want to give you, the educators, the tools that you need to impact your students, it's all about the student experience. We want students to make sure that they know that you're supporting them and that reading can be fun. As I said, I've never met a student that doesn't like to read. I've only met students that haven't found the book that they like to read. So we really want to make sure that this connects with them. Just one last thing, I'll open it up for questions here. I'm going to open the chat. I don't know if you have the ability to come off mute and you want to, feel free to just ask questions live. I'd be happy to answer them. And again, all of this and follow-up materials are going to be sent to you afterwards. But I'm going to start going through this chat log. I see lots of folks have been adding stuff in and helping each other, so that's fantastic. But feel free to come off mute if you have anything you'd like to say here.
May I ask you a question, Regis?
Please do, yeah.
I would like to find out if Queen's Library is instant through Sora, or students still need an e-card to access Queen's Library materials through Sora. Because that's sure that it's only for BPL and NYPL, but not for Queen's.
No, that's a great question. So NYPL and BPL, if you're connecting to their public library catalog through Sora, you will need a library card. So students would have to add a library card. Queens is different. Queens, you can connect with just your DOE account, with your school account. So you will not need a library card, but there is one step. And the first time that students connect to the Queens Public Library and they check a book out, they'll be prompted to sign in, but they're not being prompted to sign in with a library card. They're being prompted to sign in with their DOE credentials. And they'll only need to do that one time, and then they'll be connected.
Thank you so much. It's excellent.
You're welcome. Yeah, that's a great question, and I hope
And
everyone
I'm sorry, I
tries
have
that.
another one. To get an account,
Please.
do I need to contact you or it's online?
Good question. So 2 points there, and this is for everyone too. As far as a Sora account, if you're part of the DOE, you should have an account right now. You should be able to log in. So I'm going to drop the website in one more time so that everyone can go view those instructions and get logged in. So as far as a Sora account, you won't need anything else. You're live. If you want an account for ordering books, that's a marketplace account. It's a separate site. It's our admin account. You will need to contact me. So please just reach out to me and I can get you set up with that so that you can review our catalog, see what we have available, and order books.
Thank you
Great.
so much. What I
Yeah,
need.
great question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Feel free to come off mute. As I said, I'm dropping in the link one more time to review how to log into Sora if you haven't done so already.
I have one question.
Please.
When you were talking about audiobooks and the read-alongs, I'm an avid audiobook fan. I listen to one on my drive to and from work every day. But I have a family member who has auditory processing. Are the regular audiobooks, do they do that whole read-along karaoke style, or is it just the read-along books that you would have to buy?
Really good question. So as far as the karaoke style that's going to highlight words as it goes, that would be considered a read-along. If it contained both the text and the audiobook, it would be considered a read-along. If it's a true audiobook, we're making that distinction because there is no text. So it's not to say that it wouldn't be available for a certain book, but if you have just the audiobook version, there's not going to be any text there. So really good question. The other thing that while we're talking about that I realize I didn't mention during the presentation is if you're not as familiar with audiobooks as maybe Tony or myself, you may not know that you can adjust the speed of the audiobooks, and the same is true for the read-alongs. So if you do have a struggling reader, if you have someone that's still developing their reading skills, you can lower that speed so they can work on their comprehension. You can also increase that speed a little bit, and that's really great for students that maybe have ADD, ADHD, that want it just ticked up a notch to keep their attention. That's a very useful tool as well. Really good question here in the chat just about schools accessing Sora. You can access via your DOE credentials. So if they have that at nycstudents.net email, that's how they'll access. If you have your at at schools.nyc.gov, I believe I got that straight. I didn't flip it up. That's how you will access. If you're a Google school or you're not using your DOE credentials and you want to have an alternative login style, maybe you have your school email that you're still using, that your students are still familiar with, you can reach out to me. We'll walk you through the steps on how to get that set up, but that's not a problem. We can set that up. A good question here about how do you find read-along books in Sora? How do you filter for that? You will be able to go into the search bar and you should see the option to run an advanced search, which will let you run searches based on reading level, specific subjects, that sort of thing. At the very bottom of that advanced search is a checkbox that will search for just read-along books. So you can go ahead and click that whether you're in just the school account or the public library account as well. And then a question about taking highlights or annotating. When you're doing that,
can you repeat that? Sorry about the read along. This is Lorna Jelinek.
Hey, Lorna. No, not at all. No need to be sorry. That's why we're here. So
Right.
to find those read-along books, and my apologies, I don't have Sora pulled up right now, so I can't walk you through it. But to find those read-along books, you can go into the Explore tab. You should see the search bar at the top. You can click the search bar, and then you should see, rather than just typing in a phrase or a word or a title to search, you should see the option to run an advanced search. And that will expand the list of things that you can search by. And so at the very bottom of that list of things will be the option to search just read along books. So that should help you out there.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. A good question here from Judith. What is the process for putting ebooks from Follett into Sora? So for those of you that are maybe librarians or have Follett books or maybe Mac and something else, books from a different vendor that you now want to say, you know what, we're using Sora, let's make them all accessible in one place. You can reach out to me directly. There is a bit of a process. I'll walk you through those steps. We just need some information on what titles those are. And we need you to sign a letter to say we want to move these books. But relatively easy process, could just take a little bit of time. So just reach out to me directly. And we only have 2 more minutes. I am going to stay on for the 2 minutes and answer any other questions. But in case we get caught up in a question during that time, I want to thank you all for coming, especially on election day, especially with everything going on. I know this is a crazy year, and in a lot of respects it stinks, but hopefully it is, broadening our horizons and making us better educators at the same time. So I appreciate all of your attention today. Everyone take care, and as I said, I'll stay on for a couple minutes too in case there's any other questions that come up. And also let me thank too all of my folks in the chat here that were answering questions along for me as we were going. Thank you so much. You guys deserve bonus extra credit.
Regis, I was wondering if you could just walk us through a demo of how to just look for Spanish books in Spanish.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I don't have Sora pulled up right now. I'm going to see if I can quickly get it. Let's see. If I can pull this up in like a minute, I might be able to. But it's something that you can look for either in your preferences or when you're running an advanced search. And I do have it up. So let me move it onto the active screen here. I'm in sort of my Overdrive demo account, so it's not the DOE account, but the premise is exactly the same. If you're looking for books in a different language, you can do 2 things. Number 1, you can search for a book, and you'll see this option to run an advanced search. This was the same tool I was mentioning in regards to read-along books. Those read-along books will be available at the bottom. But you'll see closer to the top, we can search for books in a certain language. And so from here, I can pick Spanish. Castilian is lumped in with Spanish as well. But you could search any of these books. This is only going to be books that are available to the students. So you may decide that you want to broaden that group of titles by purchasing some of your own for your students. So that's option 1. Option 2 is updating your preferences, which on the Explore page here is on the left-hand side.
No.
And you can do the same thing.
Guys, get on. Oh no, mom's not on mute.
Oh no, that's okay. Don't worry, guys.
I have a quick question, Regis.
1 second. I just want to finish this thought, Marina.
Okay,
I just
sorry.
want to say in that preferences, you can update the language here to whatever you're looking for. The difference between the search and the preference is that preferences are sticky. So you may change this and then realize tomorrow that you're only seeing Spanish language books. It's because you need to change it back. So I just wanted to highlight that. Go ahead, Marina. Feel free.
Is it possible to invite you to the Google Classroom through the Zoom link that you would make a presentation for the teachers?
Do me a favor. Please email me about that. I'm always happy to do additional trainings and things like that. Barring, let's look at my schedule. Absolutely. I'd love to do something like that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
All right. I know we're at time here, so I'm going to defer to Ray. Ray, do we need to call it? Do folks have other things that they have to get to?
Yeah, we want everybody to go to the closing ceremony, final close down thing. So thank you so much. This was great. I'm sure it looks like a lot of people got a lot out of this, which is awesome. And obviously can follow up with Regis with other questions. And thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody.